We are live, 7 p.m. State Control Britain, and I landed very, very shortly ago. So if I look like I've got more grey hair and I'm a bit more tired, might be that. Richard, how are you?
Stephen, how are you feeling, my man? Long flight?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, it was delayed. Everything's delayed, isn't it, nowadays? But it was delayed because of leaving Manchester, the plane beforehand. I think the Spanish seem to be a bit more organised. But yeah, feeling good. You feeling good?
Yes, all good. All good. Super excited and raring to go.
Right. We've got Gumathon, I think it's how you pronounce that. Gumathon 1. This is right up your street as an electrolyte expert, and also you deal with coconut. What is your opinion on natural organic coconut water to help with my electrolytes? 2 years straight carnivore. Most electrolytes seem to give me loose stools. Thanks, John.
Yeah, coconut water is a good option. It's one of the better of the natural options. Coconut also very high in the MCTs. But yeah, coconut water is a fantastic option. The reason that you may suffer with loose stools with other electrolytes is either the magnesium or the calcium. So too much calcium can cause gastro issues, and also magnesium citrate. Excessively high levels of mag citrate can cause gastro distress. That's why ratios are critically important. It's very important to consume the correct ratio. There are many electrolyte brands on the market, many of which I believe have incorrect ratios. This is why, obviously, I've created my own. But yeah, coconut water it's good. It's a good option.
Yes. You use coconut oil for the MCT. Coconut is the source of the MCTs, isn't it?
I do indeed. Yeah. So coconut oil. So coming away from the water, coconut oil is made up of medium chain triglycerides, amongst other things. Now, MCTs, they're very short chains of fat, if you like, which are sent to the liver via the hepatic portal vein, where they're almost instantly converted into ketones, whether you are ketogenic or not. There are varying degrees of MCT. We have C8, C10, C12. C12, which is, in my opinion, more of a longer chain MCT. C8 and C12 are the shorter chains, but a pure C8 is going to be up to 3 times more ketogenic than a C10. So if you are purchasing or looking to buy MCT oil, C8 is far more ketogenic and far better at producing ketones. It's better at blocking inflammation because of the production of the ketone itself, the BHB. And the MCTs will create ketones in someone who is ketogenic, or whether they are not indeed ketogenic. What else was there with the So if you were to compare coconut oil, for example, to an MCT, coconut oil is made up of MCTs, but only 6% is C8. So there is a big difference between coconut oil and C8. And as you know, Steve, I create, by certification, the world's highest purity of 99.9%, which I think we may be running offers, actually. Are we still running? Let me take a look. We are still running offers. I don't know if it's on the MCT, but I'll pop a link in anyway, because we have big Black Friday deals across the site. So I'll pop that link for people to check out.
Excellent. When does Black Friday run out then?
Do you know what? I don't know. I've let the guys run with this, and they've done an incredible job. But oh my goodness, I shouldn't be looking at this. This 25% off, 20% off, 30%. Oh my goodness, 50% off. Oh, I can't look at this. Yeah.
Right.
Take a look while they last.
Coconut water can be rather high in sugars, though, says Cami.
Yeah, potentially. It's but again, I would preference coconut water over many of the other options. It's look, this is very much a case of sourcing the best product or the best options. If we were to truly live an ancestral lifestyle, we would eat nose to tail. We would consume the connective tissue, the knuckles on the bones. We would drink the blood, and we would have no requirement to search for an exogenous source, but it's unfortunately very few of us actually do this. I think you and I probably live very close to an ancestral lifestyle, but again, we don't drink blood. I would do. It's I probably would. I eat everything else. I eat generally nose to tail. But I still find, but the thing with this is that our good friend Anthony Chafee, for example, he doesn't consume any form of electrolyte or coconut water or anything else for that matter, because he obtains all of the electrolytes from his diet. But then his life is very different to mine, and as it is to yours, as it is to Dr. Sean Baker, for example. Sean Baker, very active. And I think when we do these things, they are very much outside the box compared to an ancestral appropriate lifestyle. The things that Sean Baker does, I mean, have you seen the stuff that he gets up to? The guy's like in his 60s and he's like a tank, isn't he? So his requirement may be higher than than somebody else's who doesn't need to supplement. And by Anthony's own admission, I don't think he's as active as he once was. I know he still trains and works out, but I don't think it's as often as it once was. So we are all very different. So it's it is very much an individual approach. I take the electrodes daily. I find that I thrive with them. But yeah, there are other options to consider.
Yes, brilliant. Jonathan, hello, which is excellent. And we, yeah, carnivore muscle there. And we've got, do you know, one of the things when somebody does a super chat, it doesn't give you a little thing to show it on the screen automatically, which is rather annoying. Let's do it over here. A £5 super chat. Thank you, Sue. And the question is, would you recommend ox bile supplementation to stop occasional bile diarrhea when presumably eating too much fat, 18 months carnivore?
Yeah, that could be an option. So yeah, bile salts, ox bile are fantastic, but they can downregulate the body's natural production. I think in the short term, they may be beneficial, but it's something that ideally you don't want to take longer than 3 to 6 months. So pop that in. This can help with the reabsorption of fat and help with diarrhea. What you could also look at, and you could do it in conjunction with this, is supplement with something like taurine and taurine and what's the other one I'm thinking of, Steve?
I don't know what you're thinking of.
It's taurine is going to be one of the biggest, but that's going to help with the reabsorption. So that's what I would do. I mean, if you are looking to supplement with ox bile, fantastic supplement. Keep it short term, but supplement with the taurine. That's going to help with the reabsorption of the bile. And yeah, the other one will pop into my mind as we go along, and I'll mention that as we travel deeper down.
Okay. I mean, it could be many things. Are you talking digestive enzymes?
No, it's another amino acid. It'll come.
Right, okay. Okay, cool. That's good.
Brain fog from all travel, Steve.
Sorry?
It's brain fog from all of this travel.
Oh, right. Okay. This is a nice, interesting question from the farmer's wife, farming life. I've been carnivore coming up to 3 years now. My sex drive has improved since carnivore. However, in the last 3 to 4 months, my sex drive has been higher than ever. What is the reason behind this?
Fantastic question. So look, it's carnivore is it's incredibly powerful at healing the body. And one of the things that I presented on at the carnivore retreat and for Professor Noakes recently is how the body creates and builds the body through protein synthesis. Now, if we look at every cell in the body, it's made of protein and fat. When we are living a vegetable or what we class as a healthy based lifestyle, we consume high quantities of anti-nutrients, lectins, phytates, fiber, which is an anti-nutrient, by the way, and is not required by the human body whatsoever. So we'll drop a bombshell with that one. Maybe we can get more into that. But when we're consuming these compounds, we block the body's ability to create certain hormones, and we downregulate these pathways. The consumption of certain veg, particularly cruciferous vegetables, interestingly, and I've got to put this in really quickly. One of my guys launched a post recently that I did about broccoli and how broccoli and cruciferous vegetables damage DNA. And somebody that I follow online did a post. I didn't mention me by name, but it was something about there's influence out there who are saying about broccoli and cruciferous vegetables damaging DNA, and it's easy to get thinged up with all the science and all this. And it's like, well, I hate to break it to you, but you haven't gone deep enough into the science because, and they mentioned things about epigenetics, but there are different kinds of epigenetics. And when you understand these pathways and get deeper, you can truly see that broccoli does break your DNA. Broccoli today isn't what it once was, by the way, either. It's been genetically modified, hybridized. It doesn't resemble what it once was, and it is highly toxic. One of the things that this does, other than damage DNA, is it blocks the absorption of iodine at the thyroid. And that's a fact. And if you suffer with hyperthyroidism, cruciferous vegetables are a huge no-no for you. We need to remove these because as we bite into the plant, myrosinase binds to glucoraphanin. It creates an isothiocyanate called sulforaphane. This is a compound that actively competes for absorption of iodine at the thyroid, leading to things like hypothyroidism. It can lead to other issues like gynecomastia in men and so on and so forth. It plays havoc with the system. Broccoli is not your friend. If you are gravitating into a low-carb ketogenic lifestyle, fantastic, because you're making better choices. And I teach my clients who are new to this to put these compounds in and become more ketogenic. And I don't teach carnivore. This isn't something that I do with new clients. I teach real health, real nutrition, and this comes from animal proteins and natural fats. Now, when we start to remove the vegetable compounds, the body starts to heal. And we are in a position where the body can start to ramp up and heal sex drive and sex hormones and so on and so forth. Now, if we come into this way of living after a lifetime of lack of saturated fats and the proteins and the compounds that we need to make these hormones, we've caused a lot of damage. We can't heal and repair this damage in 2 weeks or 6 months or maybe 12 months. Sometimes it can take considerably longer. So depending on how damaged your body is, that is going to translate ultimately into how long it's going to take to repair. So in this case, 3 years carnivore. It's taken effectively 2.5 years to heal and repair the body. The body will go for the area that it needs to fix ultimately. And I think this is where we've come to this. The body's healed and repaired, and now we're starting to upregulate and fix sex drive and sex hormones. Other friends of mine, their wives and partners have suffered with severe hormonal issues, lack of periods, for example. And it's only recently, after quite a long time of adding in saturated fats and the compounds that we need to make specific sex hormones, as the cycle returned and things come back to some sort of normality. So there are lots of other reasons: stress, overtraining, so on and so forth. But these plant compounds, just because you don't eat a plant compound and see a immediate effect, it doesn't mean that problem isn't occurring. The body in the younger years wants to survive. Our DNA is programmed to put us into a position for reproduction. So this is why we see. Have you seen these younger influencers, Steve? In their 20s, and they're like, look at me, I eat carb and I do this, and I'm super fit and healthy, and I'm ripped and shredded with abs. You're fucking 20. What the hell do you know? Do you mean everybody who eats fairly tidy in their teens and 20s has the ability to be fit and healthy, because your body is fighting to keep you as fit and healthy for reproduction purposes. So when you get to 25 and beyond, the things start to go awry because of all the damage that you have caused leading up to this. So those influencers who are in their teens and mid-20s and maybe early 30s, you haven't got a clue. When you've reached your 40s, 50s and 60s, such as Stephen and myself, and you're still fighting strong and breaking boxes, then come back and argue the opposite. But these compounds cause damage. The body has this ability to maintain a state of ability for reproduction for a very, very long time. And then we come into the late 20s, and now we start to suffer with problems. Now we're in a position where the body's damaged. We make the change towards keto carnivore, but it's not an instant fix. It takes time to undo all of the damage that has been happening under the hood that we have been unable to see.
Excellent answer, of course, as always. Jonathan has said about Tudka. Is that what you were thinking of?
Oh, Tudka is another option. Yeah, Tudka is really good. Yeah, that's another option. So Tudka, taurine, and there is another. He will come to me.
All right, okay. Jonathan, get that brain working. What's he thinking of? Because I can't work it.
Tadka's a brilliant option.
No,
That is a good option. Yeah,
yeah, it's taurine based, isn't it? With I can't pronounce the urus. So anyway, let's not even embarrass myself with that. Let's go to the next question. Right, let's have a look at this now. Then, are there any meats you would not recommend and why? Well, actually, I'm a great believer in variety, but it does depend on your situation. If you have autoimmune conditions, sometimes being really lion, but I think lion with lamb rather than beef is actually more beneficial. But in general, no, I don't think there's any that I wouldn't recommend. I think you've always got to look at the source and what's not the sauce you tip over it, but the source of the food, how it's been processed. So, for instance, I'm not the biggest fan of pork. I really do like pork, but I'm not like a lover of it until I've had 100% acorn-fed pork, which was amazing. And the best meat I had this weekend gone was pork. So, yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. But then you can see that it's pasture raised and it's fed natural foods, and that comes across in the taste and in people being able to cook it correctly. Yeah, so for me, there's nothing I would not recommend, because budget is also important for you. So anything carnivore is still a million times better than the alternatives. That's what I would think. But I'm sure Richard has a different take.
Yeah, look, no, it's the same take. I think you've hit the nail on the head, Steve. I think it does depend on circumstance. If you were coming from a standard diet lifestyle, look, any meat is going to be your friend, and I mean any meat, even sort of the bacon and the sliced meats in the service station that contain dextrose, and other brown sugars and other crap. Look, this is very much about the rule and not the exception. And look, if we are removing highly processed foods, very high in carbohydrate, lectins, and so on and so forth, and we're gravitating towards any form of animal protein, that's going to be a win. Doing that is a positive step. Then we tend to gravitate a little deeper down the journey. We've restricted the grains further with removing the seed oils, and those are the two biggest levers that you can pull, by the way. And they come ahead of removing carbohydrate, in my opinion. I think removing grains and removing seed oils, those are the two biggest levers you can pull. By default, when you remove the grains, you tend to remove many of the carbohydrates or sugar within your diet, because remember, all carbohydrates break down into sugar. And for those who are new to the channel, when you look at the back of a packet and it says carbohydrate 80 grams, of which sugar is 5, that is a lie. All of those carbohydrate sugar, every single one of them, it's the 5 grams are of which sugar immediately, and the rest will store as glycogen and sugar eventually. So all of those carbohydrates ultimately become glucose. So it's and that's very important. That is strictly important to remember. But what we need to understand in regards to removing the grain, by default, we remove the carbohydrate. But the most important lever is the grain, because the grains cause intestinal permeability. This leads to autoimmune issues. And when it comes to health, healing the gut is job number 1. That's the first protocol. Removing the seed oils. This helps with oxidative stress and reduction in free radicals and so on and so forth. And this allows us to heal and repair the body. Then we look at maybe reducing the sugar or carbohydrate, in my opinion. Now, reducing the sugar is critically important, but my take on this is when we reduce the grains, we reduce the carbohydrates by default. So now that we've done that, what's left to eat? Well, what's left to eat? Well, there are vegetables. Okay, so we go for the lower carbohydrate vegetables. That's fine. Fantastic. All vegetables contain plant compounds, plant toxins, phytoalexins, defense chemicals, which are designed to ward off predators. But still, we have developed an ability to consume some and manage with some, because they are survival foods. We would have consumed them through our evolutionary period, along with fruit and so on and so forth. But coming back to a point I made earlier, the vegetables today are very different to what they once were. But still, that is a transition. That's fantastic. So now we're aiming for the lower carb vegetables. Well, what do we fill the rest of the plate up with? Well, it's animal proteins. And this, in my opinion, could be any animal proteins. It could be bacon and eggs. It can be salmon, sardines, mackerel, sliced ham, whatever you want it to be. That's fine. Then we gravitate deeper down the journey. And now we're starting to become a little bit more strict. Well, which is the most nutrient dense? Well, now we're on to something else, because animal proteins of any description are more nutrient dense than any plant on the planet. And that is a fact, especially when we account for bioavailability. So any animal proteins is a win. So now we're comparing things like ham and beef and lamb. Well, beef and lamb are considerably better than pork, for example. In my opinion, and I think Steve, you'll agree with this, lamb is more nutrient dense. It's almost always grass fed. The omega-3 profile is far higher. There's 10 times omega-3 in lamb compared to beef. So now we're on a different level. So now these are the reasons why you and I would preference ruminant animals, things like beef and lamb, for example. But that doesn't mean that I don't eat chicken, which is grain-fed, because we consume the animal that consumes, the grains. So we are obtaining some of those lectins, those linoleic acids, and so on and so forth. But that animal does have the ability to process and deal with much of the toxins within. But still, we do consume some of these, but we do absorb the nutrients. We do take priority from the nutrients found within. So I eat chicken maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. I eat pork, probably the same. I preference beef and lamb. That's what I eat predominantly. If I'm traveling, I'm open to seafood. I love eating seafood, but that's not something I predominate because they tend to be higher in histamines. So all animal proteins for the win, but it does very much depend on where you are in your journey. And what we tend to find, the deeper you travel down the journey, the more that you are ketogenic and carnivore, the stricter that you tend to become in regards to where your meats come from. Initially, you can be reaching for supermarket meat, and that's fantastic. That's fine. But then as you travel deeper down, you start to look for locally sourced animal proteins. Beef and lamb, which comes from a local farm, for example. And then you look for the quality of that in regards to how it's raised, what it's fed. And this is the rabbit hole. But if you're new to this, James, any animal proteins will tick the box. And I'm sure, you'll find your way down the journey. And visiting this channel regularly, obviously you can circle back and ask any burning questions, and we can guide you further along that journey.
Brilliant. Richard, you might be pleased to know that even though you had an absence last week, your channel there's 99 viewers watching live on your channel. And last week, this week, sorry, it's down by 50% for me. So obviously I didn't do a very good job on my own last week, down to 46. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. If you can press like, that would be really helpful. And also if you can subscribe, that helps both of us very much indeed. If you subscribe to both channels, that would be really, really great. Okay, let's get into the next question. This is a passing cloud 2025, and carnivore 7 months, gutted, I have pneumonia, worried that 500 milligrams of antibiotics 5-day course will have a negative impact on my microbiome. Would you advise probiotics? Well, personally, I think our microbiome is a lot more resilient than maybe when I was low carb, a high carb advocate. And I was always at the doctor once a year at least with sniffles and stuff like that and bellyache and everything. So I think there's fewer passenger bacteria for the antibiotic to target, really. So I honestly feel that you probably will be okay after 5 days, and you probably don't need a probiotic. Your food is your probiotic. I mean, that's what your gut microbiome is there for, is to assimilate your food and help you become very healthy. So I just feel that, with the probiotics, their survival and their colonization of your gut microbiome is a bit questionable anyway. But anyway, that's my take. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I agree. Look, it's this is an interesting topic, and I think we get caught in the minutiae in regards to this, because, as you say, the gut microbes feed on the environment that we put them in. And you had a good friend of ours on your show more recently. I had him on mine maybe 2 years ago. Was it last year? 2 years? I can't remember. Ben Azadi. Ben, good friend of ours, and he is an advocate for keto lifestyle, incredibly fit and healthy. He decided to do what started as a 30-day carnivore challenge and resulted in a 90-day. He paid a fortune for tests. One of the tests was the alpha diversity in his gut before. And his alpha diversity was good. It was very good. But the doctor suggested to increase it further, add in grains and legumes and all your fibrous vegetables, obviously, which he wasn't going to do because he was going carnivore. And guess what happened? Well, 90 days of eating nothing but meat, the alpha diversity in his gut increased massively through eating nothing but meat. So, I'm a big believer in, if we want the gut to feed on specific nutrients, then that's what we feed it. And we see the shift, the bacteroidetes and firmicutes shift towards more protein and fat loving microbes, and this ultimately is what we want. It's pointless feeding the gut something that we're not going to continue to feed it with. It's you can take protein type probiotics and things, and potentially they may be beneficial. But look, Steve, I agree with you. I think it's the diet is key to this, and I'm not against medication. I think medication is critically important. If it wasn't for medication several times in my life, I would be dead, particularly in antibiotics. So do what you need to do, and just get back on healthy eating.
Yeah, Jonathan there. A healthy person would find resolve from antibiotic course after 2 to 4 weeks. Those with poor health can take 6 months even. Yes, and I think that's the key there. If you start this on carnivore and your health is pretty good, I think you're going to be quite resilient. That was the point I was trying to make. But yes, it can be pretty quick just eating this way. All right, let's get to the next question. Oh, before we do that, the school community. I'm sure you want to know about that. Lots and lots of people asking in the chat. You haven't mentioned your school community, so I will. Rich and I, we run a school community. How many times can I say that in one little phrase? So yes, this is what it looks like. You can join if you want and get involved in a community of like-minded people. And you can also go to the classroom and learn lots and lots of things if you want to. There's a keto course. There's how to be carnivore. All these question and answers about thyroid, dairy, fruit and veg, protein, problem solving, my books, Fat Club. All of these have ebooks and videos. It's absolutely brilliant resource for you to learn about everything. And we've added premium content now, where there are courses where it's more sort of educational rather than informational, and a huge take up of that. So if you want to do that, you can also do that. I'll put a link in the description in a minute. And also the calendar is absolutely jam-packed with live Q&As and stuff going on all the time. We normally do one 6 p.m. on a Monday. We also have one on a Wednesday, which I do, the Wednesday Wellness at 7 p.m. We're always live, like now on YouTube at 7, and then after this 8 o'clock we will be doing another live Q&A, so you can really get into us if you want to. So I will put a link into that, where when you go to that link, you get a choice of the standard or the premium. Do get in quick, because we are less expensive than every other, I think, big carnivore channel and health channel. Getting while the going's good, which would be good. Right. I will sort that link out in a second. We'll go to this question, and then I'll do that. I think I've got to talk a little bit here. Is it true? This is from MKFT3QT. That's a catchy name, that. I'm probably reading it wrong. Is it true that red blood cells live longer on very low carbohydrates, causing a potential false positive A1C? Absolutely. The labs think this as well. They are working on what's called an HbA1c adjusted HbA1c, hemoglobin adult 1c, and it is because we are not making the red blood cells so damaged. We're not glycating them so much, which I know there's a clue in the name, but it's a calculation which uses a constant when it should be a variable. So it's well known to be unreliable. It's guessing that the red blood cells live 120 days, and that's being treated as a constant, but it isn't. So if you have hemolytic anemia, your red blood cells might live half that time, and then when you get your HbA1c, you're told you're not diabetic, and you could be. because it's an artifact of very bad maths. If you're a decent phlebotomist, you will know that, and you'll also test for things like fasted blood glucose, C-peptide, many other markers as well, your daily blood glucose readings. And we know also from 6 years ago, I started on MeetRx, doing the diabetes meeting with Sean Baker, and everybody there was on a continual glucose monitor and saying, I don't understand, my actual daily average from my CGM is lower than my A1C was going on. And that's where we realized that the red blood cells must be living longer. You can do what's called a reticulocyte count, which is the immature red blood cells. And if there is a huge increase in production of immature red blood cells, then we can pretty much guess that your red blood cell lifespan is lower. And if it plummets, the reticulocyte count, then your red blood cells are living longer. And this has been proven time and time and time again. And those that do other glycation markers, such as the fructosamine test, which isn't a fructose test, it is a glucose test of the last 3 weeks glycation, or the 1,5-AG or glycated albumin, everyone that does that test absolutely proves, nailed on, that the glycation rate on carnivore is lower. So the HbA1c is totally unreliable. 16 years of diabetes and obesity specialist practitioner, I wouldn't trust it at all with this way of eating. If you're eating 45 to 65% carbohydrates, it's a good measure. That's it, really. But yes, that's absolutely true. Did you want to add, Rich?
Perfect. Nailed it.
Good. It's giving you a break, but you'll like the next one. Right, now, this bank pool artist, my total cholesterol is 250 and my doctor wants to put me on a statin. What do you think? But a few people have said, well, we need a bit more information, which I think this person has given. So let's do that. He's now, or she, bank pool artist, is also saying triglycerides are 79, HDL is 58, and VLDL is 13. What do you think?
Yeah, so what's that? The triglycerides, oh, you've put on the screen, 79. I'd like to try, so if we look at the triglyceride to HDL ratio, we've put 79 divided by 58, and that is 1.36. That's higher than I'd like. I'd like that to be below 1. Generally, below 1 is really good. Below 0.5 is exceptional. Lots of the carnivores that I work with seem to be even less than this, around 0.2. Which is incredible. That's a little higher than I'd like to see. The total cholesterol I'm not concerned with generally, and we want high LDL because LDL is protective. This is what heals and repairs the body. But those the triglyceride to HDL ratio, for me, wouldn't be ideal there. And there are a number of reasons for this potentially. It could be fruit in the diet. It could be other sugars in the diet. It could be the body still healing. It could be that you've just worked out. It could be that you've not fasted. So there could be a number of reasons with this. But yeah, I'd like to know, how long you've been living the life, or what your lifestyle is. We're assuming that you're low carb or ketogenic or carnivore, but that may not be the case. But there are things we can do, in order to alter that profile. But generally what we tend to see is far lower triglycerides, high HDL, very high LDL. Mine, for example, is what's that translate to as total cholesterol in UK money, Steve?
What, those three numbers there, you mean? Oh, he said 250. Yeah.
Yeah. What does that translate to in millimoles?
Oh, it's millimoles. Let me calculate. Sorry, you carry on.
Well, when you get that, I'm going to tell you what mine is in comparison.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
It may shock some people.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Right. Sorry. My calculator's not come up on my screen. I just would also like to say VLDL isn't directly measured. It's actually a calculation, which is what I thought you were going to ask me to do there. So I was working that out. Well, you take triglycerides and divide it by five, apparently. Anyway, right. So let's get this. So yeah, 6.9 millimoles per liter.
6.9. So mine's 10.26. So you double that. So mine's considerably higher. I'm not considering a statin or any other cholesterol blocking drug because cholesterol is essential for life. Quite literally makes every cell within the body. It's essential for cell formation, cell communication, nutrient absorption, nutrient transportation, the production of hormones, and it's essential for healing. We can't live without it. And my opinion is that the body, in fact, the body does make most of this. We look at compounds from diet in order to reduce the amount of cholesterol within the body. And we look at fats because we're told that the fats increase the amount of cholesterol. But did you know the sugar makes cholesterol also? So when we consume the fat, it breaks down into acetyl-CoA, and acetyl-CoA will enter the HMG-CoA pathway, mevalonate, and so on and so forth. Well, this is what happens with carbohydrate. That goes through glycolysis, and ultimately it creates acetyl-CoA also. So it's not just fat that leads to cholesterol production. And in fact, if you reduce your dietary cholesterol and other compounds that allow us to make cholesterol, then the body will make it. So the body is incredibly intelligent. It doesn't make something that it doesn't need. We certainly shouldn't be blocking this. In fact, one of the people that I work with, the first thing they do is remove statins from patients who come to see them with dementia and Parkinson's. So it's the hint, I guess, is in the protocol there. But yeah, what do you think, Steve?
Well, I think you're right, and I mean the thing is, poor old bank pool artist is also worried about his blood glucose at 104, which you don't need, which is in milligrams per deciliter. I'm guessing. That's not bad at all. That is not bad at all. I don't know why people worry about that. It's good to be under 100 milligrams per deciliter. It's just arbitrary and it's not based on any science. It's more about excursions. And if you've got an average of 100, just to make the sums easy, I know you're saying 104, but if your average is 100, but your blood glucose is 105, 95, 105, 95, 105, 95, you could be doing much better than someone who has an average of 100, exactly the same, but their excursions are 150 to 50, 150 to 50, 150 to 50. The average is still 100. So if it's regularly at 104, that's fine. Also, when you start feeding yourself a load of carbohydrates, maybe 3 times a day, 2 times a day, your body will adapt to have it lower, to be about 80, because it knows you're going to be loading up on carbohydrates twice a day. Whereas if you are not doing that, your body will know and keep you at a nice homeostatic range of about 100, 105. I mean, I'm quite happy if it goes up even to 120. It's only after about 7 millimoles per litre, about 127 milligrams per deciliter, that it starts to be problematic. And 180 is when you first actually get into the diabetic region. The actual technical thing about diabetes is when your renal threshold is met and you then start putting glucose into your urine. That's actually what diabetes is. I know people say it's chronically elevated, high levels of blood glucose, which is also true, because if that's the case, then what will happen is your body will get some of the glucose out into the urine. So, yeah, I just feel this is somebody worried about numbers, and the numbers are fine. You're right, Richard. I mean, yes, we could tweak these numbers for the rest of our lives, but in the end, if your genetic expression is giving you these numbers and you feel great, then I wouldn't worry. Seriously, I wouldn't worry. I mean, go back to basics. Let's take humans out of it. If you owned a pet and you met your friend, I don't know, down the pub, and you said, "Look at my dog. Look at him. He's full of beans. He's fantastic. He's sleeping. He's brilliant. He's full of energy. He's never aggressive. He's just friendly and wonderful." And your friend went, "Well, you better get him down the vet then." You'd be, why? Why does he need to go down the vet? And this is it. So, you've got to look at clinical presentation, how you feel, because what's the point of blood tests normally as a diagnostic tool? And sadly, 70% of medical procedures that are inflicted, and I mean that word absolutely nailed on, inflicted on a patient, are driven by what's come back from the lab. Now, Richard, I was going to keep this under my belt until I did a video on it. But even blood pressure can be wrong when you use a cuff on someone that's really lean, because of where the artery is, where the veins are, if there's no subcutaneous fat. Because Jane got a new wearable while we were away, because they had a wearable that measures your blood pressure on your wrist. But we also got 2 devices that do this. And she had normal blood pressure. If I do it on a cuff, She has blood pressure of, I think it's 180 over 120 with a cuff. And we both know it's completely rubbish. That's not true. On both variables, different ones, fine, absolutely fine. So numbers and testing, there's a lot of margin of error. Anyway, let's go to the next question. Sorry, I'm waffling on about nothing here. Right, let's go to the next question, which is, thank you for that answer, by the way, Richard. Here's a nice simple one. How about doing carnivore with macadamia nuts? It's not carnivore, but you can do that.
Look, you can do it. Carnivore plus, that's what we call that. Carnivore plus. Look, there's so much. The community is incredibly dogmatic, isn't it, in regards to, you know, what we should be eating and what we shouldn't be eating. And look, I think if we look from an ancestral perspective, we would have consumed predominantly animal proteins and fats, and that is a fact, and we know that. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't have consumed other compounds, you know. So if we look as a percentage from units of energy, or, you know, what we refer to as calories, which don't really exist, by the way, but still for the sake of terminology, 70 to 80% of calories would have come from animal proteins and natural fats. So that means that 20 to 30% came from elsewhere. And yes, there's you know, a seasonal slant in regards to this, and potentially a requirement maybe for fruit in the summer, and we can get into this as we go. I'm what I'd class as being very strict. You know, I eat animal proteins and pretty much not a great deal else. But I'm well into my journey. I'm well over a decade into my journey, and during that time, I was ketogenic for much of it. I was consuming plant compounds. I was consuming nuts and seeds. I was consuming berries. Now, the reason that I don't is because they do contain nasties. You know, all of these compounds do contain all of these, well, we call them foods, but non-foods, in my opinion. They do contain compounds that can cause harm. But that said, is a few macadamia nuts, you know, really going to hinder your progress? Well, ultimately, it depends on where you are in your journey. If you're 10 years into the journey and you eat a macadamia nut, it'll probably affect you in some way, because your body has this heightened sense, almost as if the early warning alarm systems have been increased, and we can sense when the body is attacked by something that we no longer consume. In the early days, you're not going to notice. And macadamia are lectin free. So out of the nuts, they're probably one of the best that we can consume. I would recommend, if you are going to consume nuts, they are the ones that I would say that you can consume. Macadamia and pili nuts, if you can find them. That said, there's no benefit to consuming them. If you think that you're obtaining omega-3s, then you are unfortunately very incorrect. The omega-3s found in nuts and seeds is ALA, and the human body is EPA and DHA. And in order for us to convert this conversion is incredibly small. In most studies, it shows close to zero. You're not obtaining omega-3s from there. There's nothing of any nutritional value that you're obtaining that you can't obtain from animal proteins, but you are consuming, phytates and other compounds, which may be problematic. But look, if you eat beef or lamb every day, and then occasionally you decide to have a handful of macadamias, that doesn't make you non-carnivore. It's just a different, you fall into a different category of what I class as carnivore. And this can become incredibly complex when we start to subcategorize the different versions of carnivore. Look, the elite, would be probably, we would regard as being lion, which is just beef and lamb. But then, I'm a big believer in organ meats. So, I'm a big believer in consuming the beef and lamb with the organ meats also. And in my opinion, I think that is probably the creme de la creme in the ratio that is found within the animal, by the way, not excessively high levels of one or the other. So, if Vinman, if you consume some nuts now and again, look, this is very much a case of the rule and not the exception. If you're pulling all the other levers and you can get away with doing that, fantastic. I have gravitated so deep down the journey that eggs now start to become problematic. I still consume them occasionally, but if I consume them every day, then the overmucoid in the egg starts to cause me problem. But up until 2 years ago, which was 10 years-ish into my journey, they were a staple in my diet. I would eat 8 a day and I was thriving. So it does very much depend on where you are on the journey. But look, some nuts now and again, if you want to have a glass of wine occasionally or some chocolate or whatever it is, that doesn't make you non-carnivore. It's if you eat them every day in excessively high levels, then you're not carnivore. You're eating meat and eating ice cream. But if you do that occasionally, these are the things that we would have done through our evolutionary period. When meat wasn't available, we would have consumed some form of plant compounds. But in my opinion, the more you can gravitate towards the animal compounds, the animal proteins and natural fats, the healthier, that I believe that you will be.
Excellent. Right. Here we go for the next question. Oh, that's going to disappoint people like Nick Norwitz and his fans because he's a nut nibbler. But anyway, right.
Nuts are not
yeah, and I think the fiber for most people is going to be a big problem. Right. Stanley John Brown. Great name. What do you think of the idea put out this past week by a respected carnivore keto influencer that stated if you don't eat pork twice a week, you risk being low in vitamin B1 on a meat diet?
Yeah, look, I can not eat pork for a very, very long time and I'm still thriving. So pork is probably 10 times higher in thiamine than beef and lamb. But then, how much beef and lamb are we eating? Because if we eat a kilo of beef and lamb, then we're obtaining around, 1 milligram, which is roughly where most of the research would say that we need to be. But then I would question this also, because if one requires excessively high levels of thiamine for a prolonged period of time and they're not consuming it, these people are still thriving. You and I, Steve, I do eat pork. I don't eat it, every day. It's not a staple. I certainly don't eat it twice a week. I go months and months without pork, but I do enjoy it. But pork, again, we look at it as being a dirty animal and an animal that is monogastric and we shouldn't consume it and we shouldn't consume bacon. Look, I'm all for pork chops and bacon and I thrive on good quality pork. The thing is, if we can find a good quality piece of pork, pigs are meant to be they're foragers. They're meant to live in the forest. And what do? We coop them up in sheds and feed them grains. And that's the problem. It's not the animal itself. It's ultimately the what it's fed and where they live. But I'm not against pork. If you want to increase B1, pork is fantastic. But we can do it through organ meats. Organ meats are slightly higher generally than the muscle meat, not by much. I think it's probably around 0.2, maybe 0.3, depending on whether it's beef or lamb. But I don't think that you have to consume pork twice a week, but I'm not against it. If you want to eat some bacon and eggs a couple of times a week, go for it.
Excellent. No super chats tonight, ladies and gentlemen. What are you doing to us? We need your super chats. If you want to jump the queue, by the way, then a super chat does help you. But it also supports the channel. So let's go in. Over 200 people are watching now, and Richard's channel is absolutely flying.
How many?
204 people watching now, 130 on your channel, and I've got 72 on mine. So that's good. Right. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Helps us out. I keep getting told off for not doing that because it doesn't come naturally. Rich and I are just doing this to make people healthy and get the information out there, but we do have to be realistic and we need subscribers to be able to make sure that this program goes out to people. So Vinman 5432, oh, he's a one, isn't he? Anyway, right. Is garlic, onion, cinnamon, drinking olive oil and honey okay and healthy to consume on carn keto? Right, that's a new expression for me. Carn keto. It's ketovore, isn't it? I just want to say, for me, I can't do garlic. I cannot do onions. Cinnamon, I don't do well with. Drinking olive oil is about the last thing I'd ever want to do with olive oil, and honey is too sweet for me. Too much fructose. But apart from that, yeah, I think you'd be all right. So for me, it would be a no, purely because I don't do well with it. And the reason I'm being a bit silly and sort of laid back about it is because all these things you can eat if you want to, if you do well on them. It's really that simple. But the more you take those things out of your diet, I think the better you will feel. But you'll only know that when you've taken them all out of your diet. And then you can make an informed decision on what you should and shouldn't eat. Personally, that's what I think. Now, I used to be all right with garlic, and I used to consume onions, and I used to have cinnamon on my coffee, and I used to dunk sourdough bread into olive oil, and I used to have a spoonful of honey every so often on my porridge oats. And I thought I was doing really well until I stopped, and I realised I wasn't, and I do much better without them. But Richard is a bit more level-headed than me, because, as you can see, his name is the Keto Pro. So he deals with a lot of people on keto and a lot of people on carnivore. So he might give you an answer that you prefer. I don't know.
Look, this is, I'm carnivore. As you know, Steve, I'm probably, what most people would regard as being a very strict carnivore. I don't find it being strict, but I've arrived at where I am now through many years of making incremental changes. In the early days when I was low carb and keto, I was cooking all sorts of things with onion and cinnamon and doing all these fantastic things, and it worked. That is the lever that I pulled that allowed me to get to where I am now. I own a business, Keto Pro, and I manufacture, stock, and sell a range of low carb, ketogenic alternatives and things. So I'm all for this way of living, and I think that this way is a fantastic segue to improving health and well-being. And if that's all you ever do, then you have massively, exponentially improved your health and well-being, and that's fantastic. But what we tend to find is once you started to see the benefits of a low-carb ketogenic lifestyle, then you start to travel down this rabbit hole, and then you start to pull out the things which may be more problematic. Things like garlic and a little bit of onion and cinnamon in the early days, they can be very beneficial in order to feed your your way through a ketogenic lifestyle, because it adds flavor to what you may think is restrictive initially. So I used to make all sorts of curries, for example, with all sorts of spices, and I would flavor my meals, and that's what allowed me to gravitate down that journey. If you were in that position, then fantastic. Then keep doing what you're doing, keep gravitating down that journey. But we also must understand that ultimately, garlic is a medicine. It can be beneficial. It's very high in quercetin. Quercetin is an endocrine disruptor. So it does affect the way that the body makes hormones. And same when it comes to things like cinnamon. Cinnamon will activate a pathway called NRF2. NRF2, got to get that in. NRF2 is an oxidative stress pathway. So this is a pathway that is quite literally the same pathway we elicit if we suck on the tailpipe of an exhaust on a car. So bear that in mind next time you consume things like black pepper and cinnamon and turmeric, for example. These are oxidative stress pathways. Now, they can be beneficial because of something called a hormetic response, but the hormetic response is short-lived, and the overconsumption of these compounds, which are medicines ultimately, can lead to the overactivation of another pathway called NFKB. So in the short term, these things are incredibly, or can be beneficial for medicinal purposes. They can be incredibly beneficial as we're gravitating deeper down a low-carb ketogenic lifestyle. But if you are aiming to become more animal-based, then slowly we start to remove these. But you don't have to. And again, if you were living a more of a ketovore approach, then these are fine to keep in for now. But be mindful, as Stephen says, that honey is very high in fructose. Fructose is more prone to glycation than glucose. So, and yes, you heard that right. Fructose is potentially more damaging than glucose, and that's because of its ability to glycate and create what's called advanced glycation end products. And it's to do with the molecular structure and how it's in its linear form more often than glucose. So if you are consuming things like honey, it's not something that we want to overconsume. If you are consuming it throughout the year, then I would recommend in the summer months. Over the winter, I don't recommend consuming things like berries and fruit and honey in the winter months, because they wouldn't have been available and they will lead to oxidative stress. So the reason that somebody may find a benefit to consuming these, it's to increase reactive oxygen species, because they may be in a state called reductive stress. So maybe this is a talk for another day. But look, all of these things in moderation, Vin, if you are early in your journey, Keep the carb low. Just actively try to, abstain from grains, foods that are high in lectins, the vegetable seed oils. Gravitate deeper down towards increasing the amount of animal proteins on your plate. So as a rule of thumb, if you are living a more low carb ketogenic lifestyle, fill 3/4 of your plate physically with animal proteins, with only 1/4 of your plate being plant compounds. And that way, by default, you're consuming more of the good stuff, less of the bad, while allowing that gravitation deeper down the journey and that adaptation process. But look, this is very much an individual approach, isn't it? And Stephen and I cater for, this is what the school group is all about. We work with people who are low carb, as well as being ketogenic, and all the way up to being strict carnivore. This is a very, very big list of what we classify as different lifestyles, from being, low carb, dirty keto, standard keto, clean, so on and so forth. But wherever you are, Vin, just keep moving forward, keep making these changes, and I'm sure you'll reach your end goal.
Brilliant. And I put a link into the school community, which you can join tonight and see our live later. Now, if you haven't had your question answered, we do apologize. We try to give you a full, frank answer all the time. I'm going to challenge Richard to do this in the 4 minutes we have left. This is from Gabriel Milieu. Anyway, can you explain the role of glucose in high-intensity exercise from a metabolic perspective and its relationship with the phosphagen system? I think many people call that the phosphocreatine shuttle. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, two different systems. So glycolysis, which is the breakdown of glucose or carbohydrate, glucose, and again, as we said earlier, all carbs turn into sugar. Glucose is a sugar that enters glycolysis, and that will create ATP essentially. But the phosphocreatine energy system is the fast-acting system. So this is the one, if we were lifting, if you needed to lift something really heavy, that is the PC system. There's no glucose involved in that system. So heavy lifts. So when you hear the gym bros saying, I need carb because I lift heavy, you don't even touch that system. You're not hitting that energy system. It's the PC system. And what happens is when the ATP uses up the phosphate, it becomes ADP. And what we do naturally is replace that ADP with ATP. You can also increase this by the supplementation of creatine monohydrate. For example, this is why many people will take a creatine supplement. Then we come into the glycolytic energy system, which is where we use the glucose. This is typically something beyond 20 odd seconds of certain type of exercise. And then we come into the fat burning zone. Now, the question, so it's not the heavy lifts. You don't need sugar for heavy lifts. You don't need carbohydrates. You don't need glycogen per se, and there is a caveat to this, and I'll see if I can fill this up within 3 minutes. So the PC system, the heavy lifts, then the glycolytic, and then we've got the fat burning. So the question is, well, do we need carbohydrates or glycogen for the glycolytic energy system? Well, we need the glycogen. So do we need exogenous carbohydrate? No, that's the question. So when people say glucose is essential, it is essential. I need glucose. Stephen needs glucose. Everyone on this call needs glucose, because any cell within the body that doesn't have a nucleus requires glucose. But we make glucose. We make glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. This is often described as a stress pathway, because in a normal state, it's produced by cortisol. But when you're in an adapted state, it does it via glucagon. So it doesn't use the cortisol. So when you've been adapted for a prolonged period of time, in a normal circumstance, we produce this via glucagon, for example. So we don't even hit that cortisol pathway, but we make it naturally. Now, the key to this, and this is critically important, and I proved this when I've competed previously. I did a 10K race at Chester last year, and I wore a continuous blood glucose monitor. Before, I was around 5.5. At the end, I was 18. And that's because my body created this. The body has the ability to buffer the hydrogen ions. So we take the lactate in the muscle, we send it to the liver, we convert it into glycogen and send it back to the muscle at a higher rate than you can consume through carbohydrates. You do not need any exogenous carbohydrate. And maybe we can get more into this in school in 1 minute time.
Brilliant. There you go, YouTubers. If you're only staying for us on YouTube, that's great. That's fine. It's nice to have over 200 people live. And I think we have about 2,000 people watch it back over the 2 channels. And I always include a picture of Richard in my thumbnail, but Richard doesn't put me on his channel. So maybe that's why he gets more views. I
You
don't
get
know.
more views usually. It's been a long time since I've been back up to where you are.
Yes.
This is a freak day, I think. So
I think he needs to put me on the thumbnail somewhere personally. But anyway, right. If you're just a YouTuber, it's us two here in State Controlled Britain every single Sunday from 7 p.m. If you're in school, you'll see us in a minute over there. Do join school because it's fun and we like you over there. All right, everybody, thank you so much.